Hello from Frankfurt, Germany, where I'm spending some time with my parents. And welcome to a new episode of the Blockchain Scholars podcast, sponsored by vechain. My name is Daniel Liebau, and I'm an affiliate faculty member at Singapore Management University. And as usual, I'm your host for today. Today's guest is nothing short of phenomenal. He's got his undergrad and master's degrees from Harvard and Stanford respectively, and holds a PhD from Stanford. His first career stop was as an assistant professor at Chicago Booth, and today he's an associate professor of finance and the Rudd Family Professor of Management at Cornell University. He's also the academic director of their FinTech initiative and a department editor at Management Science. He's probably the most cited researcher in crypto globally and has publications in Review of Finance and Journal of Financial Economics. Welcome, Professor Dr. Will Cong. So, Will, what's the title of your paper?
The title of my paper is Tokenomics, Dynamic Adoption and Valuation, and it's joint work with Ye Li and Ning Wang.
Okay, and then before we go into the details of your paper, can you define what tokenomics actually means?
That's right. We were trying to come up with a good title for our paper. We're definitely looking at crypto tokens. But actually, before the introduction of blockchain, of Bitcoin, we did have many, for example, gaming platforms where tokens or points are used, and they are also exchanged among the users. So we wanted to develop an economic framework to think about tokens in general. The term tokenomics to us would mean the economics of using tokens, which includes categorization, valuation of tokens, understanding their economic functionality, and also it's not restricted to blockchain-based platforms or Web3 platforms, even though that would be the topic that motivated our study. It could apply to even centralized platforms. There are certain differences that we have to pay attention to, but it's meant to be the study of the economics of tokens.
Okay, cool. That all makes sense. And now moving on to your paper specifically, what was the research question that you and your co-authors were trying to answer when you set out to start this project?
So the research question that we were looking at started with, what are these tokens? Mm-hmm. How do they derive value? And if we dig deeper, we start to ask, what are the economic functionalities of these tokens? That would be how we can explain where the value of the tokens come from. So it's along that line of what these tokens are and how do they derive value that we start to unfold or open this black box of cryptocurrencies or crypto tokens.
Would you consider your paper more of a theory paper or more of an empirical paper?
This is a theory paper involving a dynamic model. We did have a little bit of empirical exercise where we took 16 dominant cryptocurrencies at that time when we first wrote the paper to calibrate the model. Mm-hmm. But most of the discussions are theoretical in nature.
And then how would you describe your theory in simple terms so that the rest of us can understand? Because I know there's a lot of math in your paper.
The actual model definitely involves many elements and it's in a dynamic setting. So it's probably quite hard to digest. But put it simply, we want to think about a blockchain-based platform. And there are potential users, who need to decide whether they want to use the platform by holding some tokens that are native to the platform, to the digital network, and conduct activities within the network. Or they can also choose to hold wealth offline, off-chain, for daily consumption, for example. Mm-hmm. So in that environment, we try to figure out how individuals decide how much to hold in terms of tokens. And once the holdings are aggregated, that would allow us to figure out the aggregate demand for tokens. Now, for a particular supply of tokens, that would help us to pin down the price. What is particularly new in terms of the theory that we were exploring was the network effect, number one. And number two, the flexible adoption. I think it's useful to think about even currencies in general. When you think about US dollar or RMB, the more people are using it, the easier it is for me to find counterparties to transact with. So there's definitely network effect. In terms of endogenous adoption or flexible adoption, I think that's something distinguishes digital platforms and digital tokens from other currencies or fiat currencies. If I live in the US, I have to use US dollar anyway. So my adoption is not really that flexible. Yes, I can decide which country to emigrate to, but that's a much lower and much more costly action. Whereas when we switch among different digital networks, digital platforms, it's relatively easy. So our adoption decision is going to affect how much network effect we create. And that in turn is going to affect the functionalities of the token and their valuations. Mm-hmm. So it's a theory describing this type of world, this type of economy.
Okay, very interesting. If you put yourself into the shoes of a practitioner that has some interaction in their lives with these crypto tokens, what does that theory mean for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the theory foremost offers a framework to think about these tokens. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of rationalizes some of the common heuristic arguments that we see in the industry before it adds some additional predictions and insights. I would say there are mainly 4 core results falling out of the theoretical model. Number 1 is a basic understanding of the nature of tokens, whether it's crypto tokens or just general tokens. They are really hybrid assets. On the one hand, you can use the token to transact, just like we use money, say US dollar, to carry out daily activities, so that there's a usage functionality. But at the same time, holding the token means you are partaking in this ecosystem development. When the platform grows and for a rule-based supply of tokens, you can enjoy the prosperity of the platform. Compare that to the use of US dollar, right? Holding US dollar in the very long run means I'm betting on US prosperity. I'm investing in the country in a way. And that's the first result that we highlight. And that hybrid nature, that blending of usage and investment motives is a common theme underlying many digital economies and fintech innovations, in fact. If you think about ICO, right, it is consumers are also investors at the same time. Traditionally, these are 2 separate groups. So there are many other examples. The second key result of the paper is a valuation formula for crypto tokens, at least this type of platform-based tokens. That is a formula that looks a lot like Black-Scholes formula. It's a differential equation that's going to help you to pin down the valuation. And the third main result is to reveal some of the economic functionality of the tokens. One important functionality is that it's going to accelerate user adoption. And that's the typical bootstrapping community concept that practitioners talk about all the time, mm-hmm. but without a formal description. And here we basically provide a formal description of what that means. When you hold tokens, you can use a token for transactions and to take advantage of the platform. But at the same time, if you anticipate others are going to join the platform in future, that means the token value could potentially appreciate. So today that makes you more willing to hold the token. When you are more willing to hold token, even today, it makes others want to hold the token as well due to the network effect. So these feedback, intertemporal feedback over time, as well as the network effect that we experience contemporaneously, are going to accelerate user adoption compared to a platform that's not using tokens. And there are similar effects on stabilizing user base, for example. And finally, the fourth main result would be that even tokens are helpful for platform growth. The endogenous adoption, the fact that we can switch on and off and back and forth concerning the usage of the platform, means that the volatility of token price or token price returns is necessarily bigger due to this endogenous adoption. So that helps to explain some patterns in token price dynamics.
Okay, excellent. So it sounds like people in the investment management industry would benefit from understanding these results, but also the user base, those who use the tokens more for consumption.
If I may just add one more
Sure.
remark, I hope to highlight many of the results here and also in related papers already being applied in practice. I've done some personal advisory work, for example, for Ava Labs, for Definity, for Chainlink, and actually many blockchain-based platforms do need to think carefully about their monetary policy, basically token supply policy. That's going to interact with staking. It's going to affect user adoption. It's going to affect the total value locked, the token valuation, so on and so forth. And a lot more work needs to be done. And I think economists have a lot to contribute, working together with our computer science colleagues.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. This is what also makes the field of blockchain and crypto economics so fascinating, because you have all these different disciplines that converge somehow, right? So computer scientists, economists, game theoreticians. Yeah, definitely an interesting area to explore more. Another question would be around where you see future opportunities for research. So I think with the publication of your paper in Review of Financial Studies, I think you made sure everyone knows about it. I think it's one of the most cited papers in crypto economics in the world at the moment. What would you say are the key opportunities for other researchers who want to perhaps build on your work?
That's a great question. We were pretty early working on this paper. I think over the past few years, we've already seen follow-on studies that expand the discussion. One particular direction that we can expand the discussion is, what about having a designer of the platform who can design the monetary policy, the token supply policy? So that would be where monetary economics meets corporate finance, because running the platform is like running a company, and also the intersection of asset pricing as well, because the tokens have to be priced in the secondary market. So there's quite a bit of work remaining along that direction. My co-authors and I have contributed to that, but there are many others who have contributed to that area as well. You could equally think about how we can add behavioral elements of speculators in the setting, pure speculators who are not users in the system. My co-author Simon Meyer and his co-authors have written quite a few elegant papers on that front as well. And you can also flip the framework a little bit. Here we're trying to figure out the price of the token. What if we fix the price? Our goal is to introduce token supply policy so that they are stable. Then we can talk about stable coins or even central bank digital currencies, how that interact with user adoption, for example. My co-author Ye Li and again Simon Meyer, they have a paper on that. And there's actually a large literature on stable coin and CBDC that are very active. And I also think the framework can be extended to incorporate newer elements, such as staking. When you use proof of stake-based network, right? That's a form of staking. Or you join a yield farming program, a staking program. That's a form of staking where you lock up the tokens and you will get a certain rewards, staking rewards. So we can introduce that function. Then individuals have to decide whether to allocate wealth off-chain, offline, or within the platform. They have to decide how to split the wealth of the tokens between the ones that they stake and the ones that they use for transactions. So I think that's also interesting to examine. And what I'm talking about is not restricted to theoretical work. Empirical studies have already looked at network adoption as a potential factor. Regulators are also curious about how to categorize the tokens, and understanding their economic functionality is key to figuring out the right categories of tokens. These are all very interesting issues to explore.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the staking one is in particular, I think, quite an interesting question, because effectively often staking at the platform level comes with selling the option to sell, if you like, right? Because you're basically locking in part of your wealth and you can't withdraw. So that is for sure
right.
A very fascinating area to explore. Will, thank you so much for coming today. I think this was a very insightful session.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in to the Blockchain Scholars podcast today. I want to thank vechain for their continued support and sponsorship. If you found our episode useful, please feel free to share it with friends and also with colleagues. You can also subscribe to us on YouTube and LinkedIn.